Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm Chris Callahan with UVM Extension down in Bennington, Vermont. I work as an agricultural engineer for UVM. And one of the things we get into is tunnels and greenhouses, and something that I refer to generally as protected culture, controlled environment agriculture, and doing our best to maintain conditions that we want for growing. Had a lot of questions over the years about humidity and temperature control in tunnels, and specifically about doing it in relatively low tech or electricity free ways. So I hope we get to cover some of that today. And I've got a little bit of background that I wanted to provide, and then we're going to jump into Pheonix's pictures and slides. One of the main things that I really want to have everybody recognize is that there are two main things we use for controlling humidity and temperature in tunnels or greenhouses other than heaters. And one is ventilation, and that's the actual exchange of air. Inside air goes out, outside air comes in, and that's the main way we get rid of humidity without getting into fancier systems such as dehumidifiers, etc. We also use something called circulation, which tends to, the purpose of circulation is really to mix the conditions within the tunnel or greenhouse. And so sometimes I'll get an email or a phone call from somebody who says, had humidity problems, put in a bunch of HAFs, horizontal airflow fans, still have humidity problems. And part of the reason for that is HAFs are really meant to stir or mix the space. They don't necessarily do much to reduce humidity overall in the space. They might help distribute conditions so that it's equal throughout the space, but they don't do anything specifically to get rid of the humidity. So really, when we're dealing with humidity challenges, it's all about ventilation. It's all about getting that air exchange. And I know we have some great examples today from growers who are going to share that. So when we look at our simplified tunnel, in this case, just a pure ideal hoop house, one of the first things we tend to do when trying to ventilate or provide for ventilation is have some roll-up sides. And so if we're well sited and we have roll-up sides, we can get airflow in from both sides at the low where the roll-up sides are. But then the issue becomes what happens to that warm and moist air, warm and humid air, and without some cross ventilation or without some gable vents, sometimes it'll just sort of stall out under the hoop. So it's really important, if you have roll-up sides, to also have gable vents or some other ridge vent, etc. up top to let that out. What we're going to do is really try to establish, especially when doing this passively without exhaust fans, really try to establish a chimney effect so that warm air goes up and out, and the cool air, relatively dry air from outside, comes in and replaces it. Humidity tends to go with temperature. So if you have warmer air, it's going to pick up more humidity. And so what we want to do is provide a way for that warm, generally more humid air to get out of the structure. Oftentimes I'm asked how much ventilation is needed. This is from John Bartok's Greenhouse Engineering book, and he provides two rules of thumb. One is for warm season ventilation, one is for cool season ventilation. And you can see here, so that's 8 CFM per square foot of growing area for warm season ventilation, and 2 CFM, cubic feet per minute, per square foot for cool season ventilation. How to get these two ventilation rates for different times a year? The most common way is to have two fans. 2 exhaust fans, one sized roughly for the cold season flow and one sized for the warm season flow. You can do fancier things like variable speed drives or 2-speed fans, things like that. But the most common way of doing this is having sort of a smaller quarter size fan and then a larger fan for the warmer season. For circulation, sizing is 25% of the tunnel volume, so not just the growing area, but the actual volume. Don't need to go into a lot of detail on the math here. We're talking about approximations. So let me show you an example of that. For ventilation sizing, let's just assume it's a 30 by 96 tunnel with a 15-foot peak. you can approximate that even if it's not an ideal circle or a true circle, even if it's Gothic, just approximate it with as a circle, it's fine. In this case, 30 by 96 is about 2,900 square feet. So the warm season ventilation is 23,000 CFM, and the cool season ventilation is 5,800 CFM. So again, it's probably 2, if not 3 fans to make that work between the 2 seasons if you're growing in both conditions. And then for the circulation example, that formula is incorrect. I thought I had updated. I'm sorry, but you would take the area of the end wall and multiply it by the length. So there should be a 3.14 in there. Yeah, Laura asked a question if slides will be available after it. I'm happy to make these available. Also, everything I'm presenting is going to be at this short link. So anyway, you end up with about 8,500 cubic feet per minute, which in my experience is actually quite a bit more than what most people put in for HAFs. So I'd like to test that with this group today and get a sense for what people have for both ventilation and circulation. Okay, that's the end of my background introduction. Does anybody have anything to add to that or questions to ask? Give people a minute to use the chat box or unmute too if you want. And if not, we'll jump right into Pheonix's photos and experience. All right, Pheonix, if you're hydrated up and caffeinated up.
Yeah, hi. I'm Pheonix O'Brien, Holbrook Farm, Thorndike, Maine. We grow organic produce, about 12 acres in the field, and then we have, I think it's a third of an acre in greenhouses, 5 30 by 96 high tunnels. Trying to put some more up in the long run. We're fairly new to growing in greenhouses, or like really doing it and trying to do a good job with it. And this is our 3rd year doing it, and we love it. Unfortunately, this picture it's kind of poor resolution, but this kind of shows what all of our greenhouses are like. They're 30 by 96. A lot of the key elements are here though. We have power in our tunnels. We have the horizontal airflow fans, gable vents on either end, gable vent on one end, exhaust fan on the other. Tall sides, these are 15 feet at the peak, 6-foot roll-up sides, and then really big doors on either end. Either end wall is more than half door. There's another. Yeah, these really didn't come out super duper, huh? But yeah, so 1 for ventilation in the summer, 2 for getting tractors in and out. We use we are really keen on these Byler's greenhouses out of Pennsylvania. The price is really good and they're super rugged construction. It's like 2 and something. It's over 2-inch pipe, heavy gauge, really rugged, nice design. You can also see in this picture right up close one of our overhead irrigators for our winter greens. But yeah, so that's kind of what we're working with. In the summertime, we focus on hot crops. In the wintertime, we grow greens. And managing temperature and humidity is super, super important. Farm I worked on growing in greenhouses, it was very much so just like basically growing field crops in a tunnel. Not a whole lot of management going on. Luke S did not. It's a Byler's greenhouse. I'm going to spell it wrong, but Beiler. They're in somewhere in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. But yeah, so most of what I've learned, a lot came from the book Chris mentioned, Greenhouse Engineering. Can't remember who it was by, and then also Andrew Medford's book, and then I do have a couple other just like random texts, like from hydroponic tomato production, cucumber production. But I think that one of the key things that I didn't understand and that wasn't made like super clear to me was like the relationship of plant growth versus relative humidity. Plants can grow a lot better and a lot faster the lower the humidity is because they can respire more. Very simple concept. That's why vegetables grow super great in the desert. But yeah, so trying to, realizing that tunnels are the most valuable space on your growing space on your farm. I mean, this is a 20th of an acre, one house, and it's over 10 grand in infrastructure over it versus, in the state of Maine, 2 to 5 grand an acre for open field. So really looking at that and how to make it pay was kind of our goal before, doing a really good job before expanding. So for us, that meant bringing power in, circulator fans, adding heat for our tomato crops. Yeah, and just trying to, nothing super automated. The ventilation fans are automated, and the heater is automated just with simple thermostats, but we don't have any humidity sensors. We are not heating we're not heating and then flushing out the hot air with cool air to like remove humidity. But, we saw huge impact on growth and crop quality just with having the heat, the fan vents, and the circulator fans, just creating a much more even temperature and humidity situation in there, especially. Oh, and I did neglect to mention all these tunnels are double wall poly as well, which again found, huge help, especially like off season this time of year. We find the frost burns off a lot quicker. You get better light in the greenhouses. And then, they stay much, much warmer in the wintertime. There's another shot just kind of illustrating the large doors, the vents, and the tall gable peak.
Those rolling doors, Pheonix?
They are, yep. They're on a aluminum track. And that's like a special track they sell that actually has wiggle wire channel on the top and the bottom. Really nice stuff.
So one of the benefits of rolling doors that may not be obvious is just access, especially in areas where you get snow.
Yep. Yeah, these are super. So the size of the tunnel, the size of the peak, super important for, you just have a larger heat sink, air mass. It costs more to heat initially if you're using heat, but then it maintains its temperature a lot more. We find that these taller tunnels, they don't cool down as quickly in the evenings. A lot of the humidity and temperature management is built in. This is some neat stuff that I had not seen before on other tunnels, but they offered to us. They call this roll lock here. And the roll up sides actually go up into that roll lock, and it creates a nice seal for the winter time.
So it rolls down over and outside of that, and then underneath it gets captured by the cabling.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. You have a nice seal the whole length of your house rather than that kind of flapping around. Um, so we've got that on all our tunnels. Really nice stuff. Um, the stuff Byler sells is kind of cheap, not as nice. Nolt sells a nicer product. That's just a little bit nicer, more professional.
This is Byler's version, though.
This is the Byler's version, which they just sent me, and I didn't know what it looked like, but knowing now, I wouldn't get it from them again. I mean, it does its job, but it's the economy version for sure.
Looks like a little bit of a jagged transition there.
Yeah. Nolt sells like a plate, and I don't know, they line up good. Really nice. Yeah,
How
and
are
on this,
you? How are you doing your roll up and roll down sides?
we just have cranks. I wish that I had just, when I was doing them initially, gotten the automated roll up sides. I think it would pay for itself really, really quickly. Now I have 5 tunnels that don't have it, and it seems like a lot of money. But yeah, so we're just doing it by hand, which is, it's time consuming, and it's basically their open or shut. I mean, we do manage it though, like in the off, when it's starting to cool down in the fall time or whatever, and we still have tomatoes and cucumbers, we're good about getting up there and shutting them. And that's the nice thing about having the thermostat controlled exhaust. Once it gets below a certain temperature, you can just reliably shut them and you're fine. Likewise, this time of year, you're not really having to open and shut greenhouses because you have a fan going. Yeah. And so this shot here, that was the one I was wanting. We use, this is a super handy system if people haven't seen this. And this is what kind of pushed us to do better with our greenhouses, was just knowing what the temperature was, and actually knowing what the temperature was in them, and being like, oh, these, little things like getting out there and shutting the tunnels early, and capturing some of the end of the heat heat at the end of the day, makes a big difference. Or like, I took this picture a couple of mornings ago. Greenhouse 1 is the first greenhouse we put up, and it doesn't have double layer poly. It's just, we didn't do as good a job. It's not as tight. So same greenhouses, couple feet away from each other, you can see the difference in, there in temperatures just between 2 houses. With, greenhouse 2 is taller, double layer poly, roll lock on it, no heat or anything. And yeah, I saw that question in the chat there. This does require Wi-Fi, not spread out around your farm, but this works off our Wi-Fi in the house and is then connected to sensors in the greenhouses. And we also, you can see here, we use it for our propagation house as well as one of our walk-in coolers. So this is
you need a gateway to be close enough to your house to get the Wi-Fi signal, but then it's able to pass that along through other connections. Is that the way that's working for you?
Yep, exactly. We have what he calls a gateway, which is just in the house next to our router. And then that's close. I mean, I think the houses are, I think he says they're good for, like, depending on your terrain, but up to like 1,500 feet. And there are boosters and stuff. I mean, it's a relatively affordable system. They're not giving it away, but it's, it's well within reach for most small growers. And it's super helpful.
Did you work directly with Monit for that?
I went through Robert Arnold. He's out of New York, been super helpful, really good customer service, tech support. I've heard Monit has all those things as well. I don't know if there's any difference in cost or whatever, but Robert Arnold, Farm Smart Innovations. He's pretty sharp guy, and he's actually got some other really cool stuff. You know, and this is a picture from my phone. This is connected to my phone, but he's got like, you can even, you know, if you want to be able to turn your heater or your fans on with your phone, he's got relays that tie into these sensors that he can sell you for like a couple $100. You know, a lot of options at, you know, that are cheaper than say buy an automated roll up side. You know, I don't know. He's got some stuff.
Yeah, one of the other things Robert has been doing a lot of is bringing Wi-Fi to lots of different places on the farm. So you have Wi-Fi at the house, and you know, getting it to a tunnel that's half a mile or a mile away. That's he does a lot with as well. So he's a qualified installer representative for Monnet, and so he's able to sell their equipment, but he also pieces together other parts from other places as needed. So this is what he does. Helps farms get connected to the data. So.
Yep. And I meant to take a picture of it and I didn't, but you know, the beautiful thing about the Monnet here is you can it tracks each and every one of these sensors that you see here. Like, it provides you with graphs, and you know, so you can look back in your season, like if you noticed you had a lot of your tomato blossoms fall off because it got too hot, you can kind of identify when and where that happened. You know, make changes in your ventilation cooling program as needed. Super helpful tool. You know, we've really just scratched the surface of using it, but I cannot recommend it enough. Yeah. Did I send you?
We know from Wednesday's session, you're building a new wash pack with new coolers and things like that. Planning to put some sensors in there as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Planning to get all censored out.
Great. Let's see. I think you had one more slide here.
Yep, and shade cloth. So we use that. This is actually a picture of our seedling house where we also currently wash and pack. That we just use to keep it cool in there. But we have this for all 5 of our tunnels. We put it on from early June through August, and then once you start to lose light, and the vining crops are tall enough to provide shade for most of the house, we find that we can pull it off at that point. But you know, another relatively cheap per house makes a huge difference. Yeah, we found that it really helped keep it cool, especially for the fruiting crops that are sensitive to having flowers fall off, like cucumbers and tomatoes when the temperatures spike. Yeah, this is the lightest, you know, I think the 20% shade, maybe 30, can't remember, but yeah, you know, all this stuff like very much so pays for itself to just do. You know, I was very interesting. But yeah, I was, you know, very apprehensive about all this stuff. You know, the automation, the heat pulling power to these greenhouses, but I mean, there's no doubt that it all pays very well, even just to manage heat and humidity in a simple way like this. You know, I'm like, oh wow, I really should have put those automated roll-up sides on. Like, would have made a difference. You know, like, I mean, year 1, like, this is the low-hanging fruit right here, doing this stuff to your tunnels, assuming it's not too big a job to get power and stuff out to them. But you know, I mean, and even like you know, we did early tomatoes and cucumbers this year. Putting those out in early April would probably consider doing them even a little earlier, but I mean, we used to you know, we used to not put them out until middle to end of May, and you know, we saw over 2 to 3 times yield increase, putting them out earlier and having temperature control, heat control, being able to provide a semi-ideal conditions for those crops. It was big improvement.
There's a question about how much power you're running to each house.
Yeah, so we only have 100 amp service to our farm right now. I have a whole 100 amps pulled up to one greenhouse, and then so one house has 100 amps, assuming that's all available. And then from there, each house has, from that one house, each house has 30 amps. But none of that stuff, uses a whole lot of power. I forget, but we sized it all, and it's, fans. There is a sub panel in each house. Yep. Just a little, 4 breaker panel. There's just a run outlets and an on off, a breaker for the heater. Yeah, I mean, I think, this was before the world went fully crazy, but I think it was like a little over $1,000 to wire each house. They definitely eat up some wire, just the long runs, but
Great.
Yeah, that's kind of, sorry I didn't have more time to put this together. I've been extremely busy, but
it's great.
Glad to answer any more questions or,
No, this is wonderful. Thanks for making time today and for getting the pictures to me to offer a glimpse into your tunnel world. Other questions from the group? Anybody want to unmute? Feel free. Our next speaker is here. Hi, Becky.
Hi, Chris.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I was a little late getting on.
Becky's going to start off with a song on the guitar. No.
I didn't know I was like officially presenting. I haven't tuned my guitar.
So if there are no questions right away for Pheonix, we can hold them till the end. I reached out to Becky and Scott, her partner, from Singing Cedars Farm in Orwell, Vermont, partly because we've been talking a lot about tunnels lately, and they've got some pretty novel ventilation practices they're doing, and thought it would be great to share. Becky is also a colleague at UVM Extension on the veg team, and so let's see, Becky. I think
Yeah, and sorry, Scott's stuck on a delivery with his delivery vehicle is stuck in gear, so he's working that out.
I suppose it could be worse.
It's always nice when it's a brand new vehicle.
Oh man. So welcome. You wanna just jump right in, Becky?
Yeah, thanks. I definitely have, I think, taken full advantage of Chris and Andy's expertise in asking them lots of kind of fumbling questions. We have 8 high tunnels on our farm now, and it's been kind of a progression of different structures and different systems, and a lot of, a couple of our tunnels we've bought used. So I don't think we've actually nailed anything quite right. We have a lot of things that don't quite work. But the photo here is, so we primarily, I should say too, we primarily grow tomatoes. We have heat in 3 of our houses now. But we've been kind of Pheonix was just saying too, kind of retrofitting as we go along, the automation side of things. The tunnel here is ledgewood, right? Is that yeah, we ordered from Ed Persons 2 different ledgewoods and asked for extra tall ground posts. I think they're 9 feet tall. And he actually wasn't super psyched about doing that for us because he felt like the structure wouldn't have a lot of integrity. But we've really liked how these structures have performed. They're narrower. I think they're 25 feet wide and then super tall. And I wish Scott was here because I don't know exactly what the height from the bottom to that ridgepole is. All I know is getting the hoops into the ground posts was terrifying, and we had a little bit of a disaster with it happening. We have actually, I kind of robbed the idea of these peak vents on that right there. Yeah, it's a butterfly vent from making farm visits for extension. It seemed like the simplest low cost way to get that humidity out of the top. So we don't have any fans in this tunnel. And we're simply using roll up sides that go way, way up. You can see on the left, like that height is
A little bit.
probably 12 feet from the ground.
Yeah.
That's a different tunnel, Chris. It's not nearly as tall. But on that ledgewood, having those peak vents and those really high roll ups seems to get the air moving really well. We've had very little disease pressure in there with no fans or any other ventilation. So this house is a Harnois that we bought used many years ago, probably 12 years ago now. So a couple of things about this that haven't worked so well for us in terms of ventilation is those low roll-ups. So those are only about 5 or 6 feet high. And it also has a ridge vent, which we stupidly or ignorantly oriented in the direction of the prevailing wind. So it's been a big problem. And then, as many people know, recovering a ridge vent is also a headache. We have 2 layers of plastic on this house. And it's I don't know, what's it called, Chris? It's like a manual roll up ridge vent with like a spinny thing from the ground.
It's not a motorized.
No.
The
So
vent, the ridge vent? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very old, and it just hasn't like worked in the last 2 years for us. So that's also causing ventilation issues. What we like about this house is it's wide, has a lot of air volume, holds in the heat really well. And then we built on this head house that these doors you're looking into. So I'm standing in the actual head house looking in, and we put these closing doors on. The head house has a wood stove and extra ventilation. So we turned that into like an extra propagation space, which has been a nice way to just kind of expand out where we can start plants. And in that same house, we have radiant heat installed. The tube was laid probably when the house was built, and we just actually got the radiant running this year. We're slow, I guess, but we just bought a hot water heater and run the different zones. And we actually, last year was the first time running it, and we're feeling like we weren't quite getting the temperatures we wanted. So we're gonna have to play around with that a little bit more this winter. And I guess solicit Chris and Andy's expertise on that. But it seems to be promising. We do a lot of early tomatoes, and I think getting that ground warmed up nice and early will help.
Do you happen to remember the depth of the tubes?
Just deep enough that I hit them every now and then with the rototiller. They're like 10. I mean, I think originally they were a foot, and now they're closer to like 8 to 10 inches. What do you recommend for depth on them?
Typically people are putting them in at 16 to 18 inches down. And depending on planned row spacing or bed spacing, 2 to 3 feet spacing. So yeah, the trade-off is the deeper they are, the less responsive the soil temperature will be.
Mm-hmm.
The upside is you don't hit them, and you're actually capturing more of the soil with temperature. So once you do get everything up to temperature, you have more of a thermal battery to work with. So
Up there. Pop up there.
Nope.
anything more on that you want to? Sorry, question here. Do you need to run vapor barrier PEX when doing in-ground heat? So it it's these do tend to be closed systems, and so if you don't have that vapor barrier PEX, you're going to constantly be fighting air entrainment through diffusion. So generally, for almost all heating applications, my understanding is the vapor barrier PEX is important. It's generally just for the potable water use that you don't need it. Does that make sense, Pheonix?
Yeah. I can ask questions this way?
Yeah.
I don't know if you know Becky or if you guys know Chris, like a good buddy of mine is a heating guy. So he's always like, I'm always showing him these pictures of like this stuff. And he's like, that's wrong. But this is like what everybody does.
Right.
So like, I don't know. He's saying like a heater like that isn't rated to run constantly and heat. Like, I don't know. Are you guys having problems with that, Becky, or like Andy, Chris? Do you see problems with that? Like people do it.
I think we had it sized to what we wanted, because it was like we actually bought it new. But and what was puzzling was we were getting the temperatures we wanted consistently out of the water heater, but it didn't seem to be holding in the, like on the return, it was like dropping a lot. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it has to do with our soil. There weren't any leaks. I don't know.
So Pheonix, to your point, I've looked at the specifications and the installation operation manual on these, specifically the Renais, a lot. And the main issue that we tend to run into is they're designed to operate over a given gallon per minute flow range.
Right.
And if you drop below that, it won't fire. And then if you try to go above that, it becomes a flow restriction. Other than that, they're actually rated for continuous use. So that's not a major issue. They're also designed for having constant makeup water. So with a closed system, you actually get some benefit from that, with scale deposit and mineral buildup in the system. So I've known people who have run these for 10, 15 years straight without any issue in this type of application. To Becky's point about sort of slow response or really low return temperatures, soil temperature takes a lot to move. It just does. And I remember when Mark Fash and Chris Alexander first put in their ground heat up at Jericho Settlers Farm, and were trying to bring it up with a biomass boiler, it just seemed like it took forever. And it does. There's just a lot of thermal mass to move. And so that does point to, on the one hand, maybe narrow spacing of tubes, some more tubes in the ground, because they're generally, when we first started doing this, were being sized for maintaining an air temperature, believe it or not, or just applying what we knew about other greenhouse engineering sizing to using ground heat. So it does suggest maybe a more dense PEX layout. And as a result of that, a larger boiler heat source, so that you can, not for maintaining the temperature, but to bring the soil up to temperature. So
I imagine that was a big part of our problem, was not having enough tubes in there, and it's clay. So
there are, I mean, to your plumber friend's point, there are pretty slick manifolds available now, so you don't have to piece these together yourself. They often will include metering valves, so you can adjust each zone to get a certain flow rate. And they usually come with mixing valves built in, so that you can mix the return with some of the supplies if there's a concern about shocking the boiler. And in this case, it's an on-demand instantaneous hot water heater, so there's no concern there. Okay.
it's definitely nicer than the hot water heater we have in our house.
It's a nice heater, Becky. Yeah. Okay. Let's see, what's the next slide? Cool.
Sorry that I ran around and took these the other day, and they're not my best photos. So here's the finer moments we've had. you know, I think when we hit our like freak out, when we get bad ventilation, we run around and cut things out of our houses. And this is an example. So this is a short used Rimmel we bought, and it's a low house, and it didn't have roll up sides. So we put in you can see the blower fan on the end, and there's an automated louver on the front. So theoretically, like, we should be able to push the air through the house, but we weren't getting enough air movement, and we get this dead zone right in the middle. And particularly with tomatoes, when they form their canopy, we were having a lot of botrytis and other disease problems. So one solution is we put like swinging doors on the front, and then we popped out this flap. Basically, it lifts up, and we stick whatever wooden prop is nearby under that. So it's just framed out by 2x4s, and it allows the air to kind of blow through more effectively. But I don't think we've solved our problems. We still have some issues right in the middle of that house. And I was noticing we had zucchini in there up until last week, and even the zucchini had like this little powdery mildew outbreak right in the middle of that house. So there's just this dead zone where the air is not going. We're not running HEF fans in there, which is probably the big thing we should get in. But we put up 3 Harnois Ovaltecs. And also with these extended ground posts, we love these houses. They felt safer after what happened with Ledgewood to get in, and went up really quickly. More expensive frames, but we're super pleased with them so far. So again, we're going with a narrower frame and taller frame. We converted everything to the socket roll-ups on almost all our houses. So just like Pheonix was saying, we are wishing we put in automated ventilation, because 8 houses and they all have different, or they all had really different roll-ups. So especially like if somebody went out, I'd be like, oh, well, that house, you got to be like, there's all these like nuances, and it was like super finicky. Can't really ask somebody to farm sit when there's a danger with every roll-up. So these are just the socket, run around with a screw gun, and they go super fast. The downside is if you can't find the screw gun because somebody used it. So I'm advocating for backup ratchets everywhere on the farm. But they've been a good in-between solution. It takes like 5 minutes to do.
Where did you get those from, Becky?
I don't know. I can ask Scott and send it out to this group later.
They look like the same color as Advancing Alternatives, but I don't know that they are.
Oh, well, the roll-ups are the Harnois, what came with the Harnois kit. Okay. They're not Advancing Alternatives, I don't think. And we actually got like an off-market one that it's not tensioned quite right. So these are nice. And we were able to get them just that unit from Harnois for some of the other houses. So.
And what is it about the installation or assembly in the Harnois that was more safe or easier than the Ledgewood with the taller ground posts?
Yeah, so there's not as much flex in the bows, and with that oval shape, they just kind of, you're not pushing them in and trying to get them to snug in. They just kind of like, and they don't have as much of a drop. And I think it's only like 8 inches on the Harnois versus the Ledgewoods. I think it's like more, I could be wrong, but closer to a foot. And we just had to put a ton of tension on the Ledgewoods to get it to slip into the ground post.
So for those who aren't familiar with the Ovaltech, the typical construction hoops are relatively circular. With the Ovaltech, it's actually an oval like that, and it gives it more strength, more bending strength. So you can kind of see it here. This is sort of the wide side of that hoop, and if you looked at it coming the other way, it'd be more narrow. It's an oval cross.
Yeah, it feels sturdy. It was definitely more rigid to go in, and they just want, and also, I mean, they're spaced. It's 6 feet versus 5 or 4, so a lot less of them, and it just went up super quickly. We got all these 3 houses up in like I don't know, a month or something. It was pretty fast.
Rachel has a question for you. Becky, why do you prefer the narrower house?
We've really liked it for the tomatoes. I mean, that's our primary cash crop on our farm. And we've gone back and forth with what kind of trellising system to use. Like I said, I can tell you all the messy progress, but no final answers on best ways. But we've tried the clipper system. We've tried dropping and lowering and leaning. And I think just letting them go as tall as they can. And on Jericho Settlers, some of these bigger production farms, that's what they're doing as well. And I just feel like the airflow is really great with a tall house. We don't get that humidity kind of pushing down on the leaves. And like I also said, I think having that high roll up is the key to those taller houses. So really getting those sides way up. I'll defer to the engineers on whether any of that's actually good rationale, but it seems like the minute we put up those ledge woods 2 years ago, we were like, oh my gosh, we had like this, we plant really densely. I mean, this like thicket of cherry tomatoes and not a blip of disease.
So the reason for the narrow house was that you have more access for ventilation. Was that?
Yeah, like cross ventilation and the tall roll-ups.
Makes sense to me.
And we're not running fans in most of those houses at all. So, yeah, and then the combination having those butterfly vents to let the air out of the top. Seems pretty
Skipped over this one because I wasn't sure what order you wanted them in, and you started talking about the roll-up, so I jumped over this one. Was there anything here you wanted to highlight?
I don't think so. We bring in, we're on heavy clay soil. We bring in a lot of sand, so it's actually helped us also build up, like, be more thoughtful about the pads we're building. So this one, you can't quite see it, but the side I'm taking the picture from is a good like 6 feet off of ground level. So we're getting better drainage. And then we've been experimenting with these vertical airflow fans, which are Vortigan is the manufacturer of them. And they're most commonly, I think that most common application is in poultry houses. And they're like pulling air from the ground and then dispersing it back out, like the direction of the arrows in the photograph. And it seemed logical to us that that would work well for tomato crop, to pull the air from the ground and out the canopy because it's already rising. The HAF fans I know can work really well, but in tunnels of this size with that much canopy, I've not always been super happy with how they work. So we installed a couple of these last year, and I think we've been pretty happy. We didn't have any disease in the tunnel that has them. This is my like farmer hat, not my like researcher hat on, but they're fairly expensive, but considering we only need 1 or 2 per house versus 4, we've been pretty happy. Scott was saying he thinks like, you know, ideally it would have a lot more space between the top of the greenhouse, like because it's not, you know, between the canopy and the top of the greenhouse isn't much distance in our house, but it would be nice if there was more room to push the air up out of, but I don't know if I don't know, Chris, if you've seen other people using these.
More interest in this. I think oftentimes it, you know, if you stand in your tunnel and you know the HAFs are running and you stand someplace you're not feeling that, then you know that's an indication you need more floor. You don't see leaves moving. That's sort of the telltale that you need more. And I think one of the nice things about this approach is the actual inlet to the fan is up and out of the canopy. So it should be drawing in a more diffuse way from everywhere. And I think the other thing is they're high capacity. And so to your point, you need fewer of them.
Slower, I think it's slower moving, but it seems to move more of a volume of air.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. And that was sort of the same value proposition for using something like a Priva Uni HAF fan, which is more expensive but had more throw. It could get the flow further away from it. More expensive but needed fewer of them. So there are some options other than, you know, what's commonly used, the Schaefer's or even a box fan from the department store. Although many people have been producing for decades using the $9 box fans, and when they keep half a dozen on the shelf, and when they break, they get replaced. So, you know, lots of different ways to do this. But I was excited to see this and to hear your experience and Scott's experience back there.
Yeah, we've been happy. You can see one piece we didn't really work out very well. You can see it's tethered with a rope. It wiggles a lot when it's running. And the first time we ran it, the cord just wrapped right around it. And we're like, ah. So again, I don't know if maybe if we need to be installing it with more like framing, but
is the brand name Vosterman or
Vosterman, sorry.
Yes.
I think, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think that might have been the last one for you. Anybody have questions specifically for Becky or Pheonix so far? And then we do have one last speaker. Feel free to unmute if there's anything you want to talk about that's come up so far. One question is, Ledgewood tunnels are approved for NRCS EQIP high tunnel programs. What about the other tunnels discussed? I believe everything discussed is also approved.
Yep, we had those Harnois. That's kind of how that happened. Actually, we applied for the one Ledgewood, and they were like, "Well, you could get more," and we're like, "Oh, let's get forward houses." And it pays for the Harnois were a lot more expensive, so it's just a per square foot payment, so we paid more out of pocket.
Pheonix, any idea on the Byler?
Yeah, they were approved with some modification. The Bylers are all, they say, just to tech screw the bows together, which I think, depending on where you are, but in Maine, they got to be through bolted, but they sent us some bits and the bolts, and we just through bolted them. Non-issue.
Cool.
Yeah, a little bit of like, hey, can you approve this? Blah blah blah. They're Amish, so they don't have like real engineered plans.
Yep.
But we got them. We all of ours were through them. Yeah.
That's great. Cool. Well, let's see. I think we have either Naomi or James with us from Dickey Hill Farm.
Yeah, James here.
Hi, James. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Didn't actually know I was going to be
Yeah.
a formal speaker,
The
but
reward the reward for sending me a picture is you get to
Yeah.
talk. Yay. Sorry.
all right. Well, here we go. Yeah, I can add my video too. Yeah, so we have 4 30x96 Rimmel nor'easters with the extended ground posts. All of our tunnels are passive ventilation. We don't have electricity run out to any of them. It's something every year that we think about. The main concern that we have in the summer growing season is in our cucurbits tunnel when we add ProtectNet. All around the tunnel, we really lose any of that passive ventilation, and we see really high temperatures and high humidity, and we see a lot of aborted fruits in our cucurbits. And yeah, so we tried adding some 30% shade cloth to that tunnel this year, which seemed to help a little bit, although it was quite a cloudy and cool July and August, so maybe it wasn't a great year to really be the first big test year, but still a problem we're having. And I was sort of, hoping to hear about some solutions for maybe increasing airflow and I mean, it seems like, adding electricity and some venting and circulation is probably the way to go. But yeah, so that's us. The other thing that we did when we built our tunnels, we do a lot of winter growing. And so adding 8-foot doors on each end is pretty critical, so that in the winter when the sides are sort of pinned down by snow, we can open those doors on either side and get pretty good ventilation in there.
Love the idea of the sliders being inside too.
Yeah, Yep. So then in the winter, there's not a lot of snow. You don't need to do any snow removal to get in there and open the tunnel. So as soon as the sun comes out, we pop them open. The biggest problem we have in the winter is with the ground heaving right below the doors. We usually have to raise the track up a couple inches midwinter to free them up. So that's my presentation.
Cool. That's great, James. Thanks. And sorry for the
Yeah.
surprise. Appreciate you
All right.
sharing. So that's a single layer of plastic then. You don't have an inflation fan because there's no power there, right?
No, and we're not heating any of them either. And we're like, this tunnel has spinach going into the winter there, and then we do some bunch brassicas and brassica salad mix, and we haven't found the need to heat those tunnels to keep those plants going through the winter. Usually we take a month off from harvest, maybe in February, but usually enough heat to keep those plants alive and harvest through the winter.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. Let's open it up. Oh, sorry. One question for James. Are you using row cover?
We do use row cover. We use cover TN40 big sheets, and these low crops we hoop with just wire hoops, and then we use a taller makeshift hoop for our bunch greens. And row cover comes off anytime it's sunny or above freezing, just to get them as much light and as venting as possible. I see more and more people growing spinach without covering, and that's very tempting because covering and uncovering every day is a pain, and also just the increased airflow of never having cover on them would probably help with the classic spinach diseases that we see in the winter tunnels. But not brave enough yet to go into those cold nights without row cover.
So one
Hey,
thing.
James,
Go ahead, Rachel.
you have any cladosporium in there this season?
No, none yet. Knock on wood. But we did. We treated all of our seed we bought a sous vide circulator and treated all of our spinach seed, and it all looks really good so far. And it's been so warm. We've been harvesting for the last month off of one of the tunnels of it. So yeah, all looks good.
So, James, the one thought I had for increasing ventilation with ProtectNet on would be looking into maybe a larger gable opening there. That probably is, even with the ProtectNet, going to become your restriction, though at least the one you can do something about easily, relatively
One
easily.
thing I actually did this year too that I changed was in the gable vents, I didn't put ProtectNet on it. I put just like window screen, which is like a little bit bigger, and I feel like the window screen definitely lets a little bit more air in and out. So that seemed to make a little bit of a difference. But yeah, maybe in the 4-footer.
What's the mesh on the ProtectNet that you installed? Do you know?
Oh,
smaller than the window screen though, huh?
Yeah, it feels, yeah.
And is the main thing you're trying to exclude cucumber beetle?
Yeah, primarily.
So I'm wondering if maybe there might be an option for something with a larger mesh. Go, Becky. You have some thoughts on that?
I've never tried it, but Steve Bogash, I think is his name, who's I think he sells things, but he's in Pennsylvania. He talked about using patio screening. He's done a lot of trials on cucumbers, and it's super inexpensive. And he says it's a little bit of an annual expense, but he just wiggle wires it in. And it's just like the Lowe's, Home Depot patio screening. So a really cheap material, but I don't know.
Yeah,
the annual expense being labor.
It doesn't really hold. It doesn't have the lifespan of ProtectNet.
Gotcha.
But if you're taking it on and off anyway, I think you might get a couple seasons out of it.
Yeah, so I guess I didn't realize that there were different weights of the ProtectNet. So that seems like maybe an easy first solution. I think I think I only saw the one option when I was purchasing. So
Do cucumber beetles? I mean, I don't know the life cycle of them. Do they come in at the beetle size, or do they come in smaller? Or, yeah,
I think so. We rotate through our tunnels all 4 years, so assume that there's none overwintering in the tunnel from the year before.
Yeah.
And yeah. Go ahead, Becky.
Sorry, I think they overwinter in field edges, like on wild cucumbers, and they fly in and they find, I mean, they'll find any cucurbit, I think, no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, the protect net's been great. I mean, we haven't had any cucumber beetle issues, but we have all the issues that come with excess heat and humidity.
And you're putting it up on the roll up side opening.
Yep, we do it on the roll-up sides. We just wiggle wire it in and then batten it down on the baseboards. And then, yeah, I actually built sort of window screen doors. So I pop out the plastic doors and put in window screen doors that we can open and shut, and put in the window screen on the vents. But
So
yeah, it's really that cross ventilation through the sides that we really lose.
Yeah, I wish I had a picture of Ben and Danielle's screened tunnels up at Route 5 farm, but one of the things they did is basically, the top third or even top half of the tunnel, basically the entire gable is screened as their outlet. And if you think about it, you're trying to match the area of your roll-up sides that's been screened so that whatever airflow is coming in there can go out the top. So if you may want to look at ways of increasing the outlet, the gable outlet screened area. Some ways that's done in larger greenhouse production systems is actually building out the gable vent in 3 dimensions so that you get that additional area of the sides, not just the face, but the sides. And so that could be done as well to give you more flow area, because that's basically you've installed a filter, and any filter takes it adds resistance to airflow. And so one lever you have to reduce that is give it more area of flow, so the velocity is less. So that's the name of the game there. If you can't adjust the coarseness of the screen, which would definitely be something to look into.
I'm curious to hear from Jay Menard, who put up window screen.
Yeah. Jay Menard, want to pipe up?
Sure. We it's just what we had on hand. So it's what we used in the first tunnel. And we did it it's in our prop house. That's what we did first. We put it on there and it's held up fine. And we don't take it up. We don't take it up and down. It's just permanently in on one tunnel. It's in the second channel of wiggle wire. And then in our first ledge wood, we did the wood slats, which I would not recommend doing, but so that's held up with wood slats in that one. I'm hoping it never wears out, so we don't ever have to deal with it, but obviously the wood's gonna rot soon. But it's fine, and I mean, obviously there's a difference in airflow, but I can't feel it. Once we put it up, we didn't see an increase of disease. It's worked really well, and it was pretty cheap. I can't remember now, but I think it was like $100 a roll. Maybe it was even less than that. And you can get it in different heights, 4, 5, 6 feet, maybe even more, 100 feet long.
Do you, one thing I've been concerned about with leaving screening on all the time is excluding pollinators. Like in our cucurbit house, they're self-pollinating varieties. But like if you're growing tomatoes in that tunnel, do you introduce pollinators?
Yeah, so one year we didn't bring bees in. Like the first year when we rotated the tomatoes into the house that had the screening up, I was like, I don't know what we're gonna do. And so we never did anything with the electric toothbrush. I started out shaking each trellis line, and that really quickly fell to the wayside. And then I resorted to just running my hand down the line. And then I decided that it was good enough just while I was trellising. And it was fine. I mean, the pollination seemed to be okay, but we have good winds. We're pretty close to the water. So we have good sea breeze in the afternoon. And I guess that was enough. And then we did bring in this year, we brought in the copert bees, I think like a quarter hive. And did those, and I don't know. I'm not sure if the bees make a huge difference or not. I was kind of surprised. I mean, I know tomatoes are, they self-pollinate, but it needs to get shaken enough, but they seem to do okay. So next year we might not even do the bees.
Yeah, nice. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to hear anybody else's experience with bees or not in the screened tunnel, because I didn't really know what to expect, and it seemed to be okay without them. And I don't know, I can't really say it was necessarily a lot better with them, but I was happy to not be thinking about whether or not I should be shaking the plants. That just seems unmanageable.
Anybody have thoughts on pollinator access with screened tunnels? Experiences?
I have a couple of thoughts on that, Chris. I lost my ability to raise my hand, but
Go right ahead.
I think like we use bumblebees early when there's no airflow, but I think like Jean's saying, I think when you have good wind movement, and you may not need them. So I usually buy bumblebees for like the first 2 houses and then move away from them. And to James's point earlier, so I think this is true. This is again from this guy, Steve, down in Pennsylvania, that when you're planting parthenocarpic cucurbits, you actually don't want pollinators on them because they work the blossom and cause it to like morphologically change. So you'll end up with like a curled, you've probably seen this on some of those cucumbers that are supposed to be long and straight. And like I've grown parthenocarpic cucumbers just for fun, like in a row mixed with tomatoes. So pollinators are getting in and I like never get a straight one. So his suggestion was like isolate your plants that you want to screen as the ones that don't need pollinators, but don't try to mix the two up. And I don't, anyway.
That explains so much. Thank you. of my own cucumber experience. Cool. This and what you're sharing here is a photo from Route 5
So this
farm.
is Route 5, what you were saying. So that vent there has the insect netting on it. And I'm trying to remember, they had some revelation about which side to put it on so that they could get the plastic back on easily. I think they just leave it on and then seal the plastic back on top of it in the winter.
We're coming up on our 90 minutes, scheduled 90 minutes. Very grateful to everybody sharing today and great questions and conversation. Thank you to our speakers, Pheonix, Becky, James, and everybody else who jumped in with questions and experiences. Really made for a very rich conversation. Thank you.